Hey there, it's Evan Nathaniel Grimm, and welcome to my October 2024 forecast. This is going to include my global predictions as well as my horoscopes for each zodiac sign. So I'm going to kick it off by talking about the global themes, the high level trends that I'm seeing, and then I will dive into, again, the horoscopes and predictions for each sign. So I'm going to share my screen so that we can look at the charts. And, October definitely will make September look like a walk in the park. As I spoke about September in late August and I was forecasting September, I felt that September was mostly a sort of like back to business type of month. It was definitely a time for increasing productivity, maybe refining certain like health choices or like your lifestyle. And I think that September had this sort of tactical sort of theme and energy to it. But October, on the other hand, sort of feels like this burst of energy that is almost like breaking through like a concrete wall in a space that you felt was like very much like solid and enclosed. So it's like, September, again, it felt focused to me. And October, though, is shocking and definitely will be full of surprises. But before I walk through some of those key themes, I want to talk about the dominant transits and also some of the key ingresses, just to give you some of the sort of data behind them at the head. So the dominant transits include a cardinal grand cross between Mars, Chiron, the Sun, and Pluto, and at some point the Moon. And that cardinal grand cross is really, forming in that sort of middle October time period, the 13th through the 17th, really. And the cardinal grand cross, it has the energy of like a four-way stop sign, and no one is really willing to go first. So there is that feeling of gridlock. And cardinal signs, any sign in the cardinal modality has a sort of dynamism to it and a sense of action, decisiveness, and sort of executive presence. So when we're talking about a cardinal grand cross, it's really upping the ante. It's like even more dynamic, I think, than other grand crosses. And because of that, I do think on a personal level, you could use that to maybe, set yourself on a new path, walk forward on that new path. But I think that for the most part, in the collective, this will be felt as, this sort of unrelenting, intractable conflict. Also, Pluto will station direct finally at 29 degrees of Capricorn. And as it stations direct, starts moving forward, there will be a sense that some of the, long-standing foundational systems, institutions, governments, corporations, etc., like are going through a major transformation. That's actually going to close out that Pluto and Capricorn era. And what we're going to see, I think, is whether it's a prominent figure or an organization that we thought was sort of infallible or impossible or irrefutable or impossible to scrutinize or impossible to penetrate, like these sorts of like organizations are going to experience some organizations may experience a bit of like a tremor or a shakeup in a way that we didn't expect. And again, certain figures that we may have seen as sort of almost godlike, are going to show some weakness, some cracks. And that's all part of Pluto's final transition, and transit out of Capricorn into Aquarius on November 19th. But I really think that October is that sort of hotspot where we're going to witness a lot of sort of catalytic moments that almost force through this transition of really our perception of certain organizations, our perception of certain role models. So on a personal level, you may, suddenly look to someone else for guidance or for a foundation or a structure. Maybe it's you yourself. But also you may look upon certain, again, organizations, companies, governments, through a different lens, because Pluto ultimately as well as Cat Williams said, in his interview with Shannon Sharp earlier this year, all lies will be exposed. And I think that's Pluto's final act in Capricorn, is to really reveal things that have been hidden that I think, may undermine the reputation of certain, again, public figures or massive organizations or brands. And of course, we have started to see, I think, one of the main stories to come out of this, which is the whole scandal with Diddy and his parties and the celebrities that are associated with those parties. And I think that that will be a reckoning for Hollywood in a lot of ways. Also, we have Jupiter stationing retrograde in Gemini around that same time. And, Jupiter has been in Gemini for many months now. And as Jupiter stations retrograde, we're going to start to focus on maximizing the opportunities that have already come through for us in a way. And we will also look back on the sort of bevy of information that we've been absorbing. There's just been a lot of stories constantly percolating through the news. And it's been difficult, I think, to compartmentalize everything that's been going on. Jupiter is in detriment in Gemini, so it really leads to information overload, as I've said in other YouTube episodes. And I think the retrograde might not be all that bad in that way, because it's again a look back at maybe where did we miss certain opportunities? What information did we actually need at that time, and how can we apply it to a problem that we're trying to solve now? And Mars will enter its pre-shadow phase this month, and really starting pretty much at the beginning of the month. So Mars will retrograde in December. And when it's in its pre-shadow phase, there will be some themes that we will have to deal with during the retrograde. So once Mars goes into that pre-shadow phase, we will, I think, start to feel, again, a preview of the Mars retrograde, which any Mars retrograde will test our stress management. It can make us more sensitive to stress. It can cause us to overreact when it's not warranted, obviously, and it can cause us to back down when decisiveness is more so the necessity. So Mars retrograde sort of is a lack of integration in a lot of ways of like the masculine archetype, where again it's like overemphasized, overplayed at the wrong time, underplayed at the wrong time. So or at a time when again action is called for. And in that particular Mars pre-shadow phase, it's going to be in the sign of Cancer, where it's in a fallen position, and it's going to square Chiron in Aries, and it's going to square the Sun. It's going to start to oppose Pluto. So I'll describe kind of what that means in a bit more detail, but essentially the Mars pre-shadow will, I think it will escalate a lot of the conflicts that we've already been seeing, whether in the Middle East or in Ukraine and Russia. And then Venus will oppose Uranus this month. And I think that if there was some type of economic shock, it may happen when Venus opposes Uranus. And I think that with Venus and Scorpio during much of this month, any economic ripple effects would probably have something to do with like consumer debt, or, maybe at a national scale as well. Like, on a fiscal level. I mean, so I think that like the whole theme, whether it's like credit card debt or government debt, Venus and Scorpio could call that out. And with Pluto stationing direct in Capricorn, you have to wonder if it's going to regurgitate some themes from, Pluto's entry into Capricorn. Maybe there's something with the housing market changing. I don't want to guarantee that or anything, but, and like I said, maybe the economy will be just fine through the month of October. But I do believe that if the economy was to have some kind of, miniature or more major sort of like shock or earthquake within the economic systems, it would probably happen sometime between Pluto stationing direct on October 11th and Venus opposing Uranus towards that middle point of October as well. So let's jump to key ingresses. So Mercury enters Scorpio October 13th. The Sun enters Scorpio October 22nd. And Venus enters Sagittarius on October 17th. So, I mean, those are really the main ingresses, apart from the moon, of course, the moon will be shifting signs frequently, but you know, a lot of the planets are in their usual positions, of course, the social planets, the outer planets, they're not changing signs at this moment. But of course, there are significant aspects, most significantly, the cardinal grand cross, which I think will create a lot of these October surprises, which I think are it's something I actually think that this is the most probably the most shocking month of the year. I know that July was that way as well, and I talked about that. I sort of forecasted that in June, but and even in January. I mean, July was sort of like, major peak in like chaos and volatility as we've seen. But I do think October could rival July in certain ways, which I'll talk about. Um, but yeah, definitely the energy is changing dramatically from September. It's not that nothing happened in September. Like, obviously, like the Diddy scandal is massive. It happened during the eclipse. And I do think that story will unravel over the next couple of years. It will take a long time to fully understand what's beneath the surface there. And I think that will come to light as the North Node goes through Pisces, because that eclipse was in Pisces on September 17th, which, is a harbinger of what's to come when the nodes shift. So now I want to talk about some other noteworthy transits. I'm actually going to have my screen. I'm going to toggle through the days here. So, I mean, I'm not going to talk about this right away, but we do have the solar annular eclipse in Libra on October 2nd. But in terms of again, other like sort of transits, we do have Mars entering its pre-shadow phase when it hits 17 degrees of Cancer on October 4th. And you'll notice that right away when Mars goes to 17 degrees, it is already locked into a square. It's already approaching a square with Chiron and Aries. It's squaring Mercury. It's starting to square the Sun. I mean, I like the trine, the grand water trine, with Saturn and Venus. But, in astrology, in my practice and many other astrologers' practice as well, I think the hard aspects are much more noticeable and dynamic, of course, and the soft aspects, even if they're nice, like a trine or a sextile, it's not that they're not important, but for the sake of like forecasts, and like what will the collective kind of remember and what will the collective feel, regardless of whether or not they're sensitive to astrology or energy, and they don't whether or not they care about it. Like I do think oppositions, squares, and conjunctions will dominate in our sort of experience. So that's why like I tend to focus on the hard aspects, whether it's in my short form videos or on like a YouTube video. Because again, like in my own experience, my clients' experience, and in my, in my horoscopes, like I find that they're most accurate when I focus on, again, these hard aspects. So anyways, even though Mars is trining Venus early in October, trining Saturn, which, in theory could help you really push some kind of professional project forward that also has like a creative element to it, or maybe it's like it has some kind of financial upside, meaning it's like lucrative. Like, even though that is possible here, I think we're going to feel Mars squaring Chiron a lot more, and like Mars squaring Mercury. Like there's sort of an argumentative nature there, but with Mars square Chiron, it does feel to me like there could be an exacerbation of the conflicts that are ongoing between, let's say, Israel and Lebanon, or Ukraine and Russia. And, you know, yeah, there could even be some tension between like the, sort of presidents, prime ministers, leaders of some of these countries. And even some weaknesses being shown among certain leaders, or maybe some leaders even bowing out or exiting the stage, and their supporters suddenly becoming inflamed. So what's going to happen too is, Mars is going to get all the way into the early degrees of Leo retrograde in December, and it's going to obviously go back to 17 degrees of Cancer in late February of 2025. And as it's stationing direct at that time, it's going to be squaring Chiron. So it's squaring Chiron off and on for a really long stretch. And Mars and Cancer squaring Chiron and Aries just feels like a wartime type of transit. It feels like a transit where people are defending their homeland. It feels like also they're defending their homeland in reaction to something maybe explosive or shocking that's happened, whether it's an incursion or an invasion, into their territory, or it's like one of their sort of leading figures in either their party or their faction, or the leader of organization, or even in a nation being affected. Because like we've seen this theme with Chiron and Aries, the North Node and Aries. It has been like this year that a lot of the news stories have been surrounding, whether it's like King Charles getting diagnosed with cancer, or it's like, a politician, I don't know, like Mitch McConnell deciding to retire, or it's like Joe Biden stepping down because, of his sort of, fitness for office, or, other events like, all the sort of shock of like, the Trump rally in Pennsylvania in July. Like we've seen all these themes that either almost like harken back to 1968 when the North Node and Chiron were both in Aries, or whether they just sort of conjure this theme of Chiron and Aries actually being a lot about the wounded masculine, the wounded masculine, or with Aries being just sort of leadership, sort of this. There has been a theme all year of like leaders not necessarily fulfilling or meeting expectations, right? Or fulfilling their obligations, or again, sort of matching the expectations that maybe the public has of them. So when Mars squares Chiron, I just like one of the main through lines of this month is, to me, again, not necessarily like failed leadership from like a policy standpoint, but like literally like leadership, like breaking down, like from the standpoint of like their health, or becoming very vulnerable, or bowing out unexpectedly for other reasons. So that's what gives me a lot of I don't want to say anxiety, but just, as I try to be objective about each month, it just that's what gives me a little bit of like a quickness in my breath. I'm kind of like, wow, this feels like very like rapid, like quick paced. There is a bit of a volatility there, some tension, and some reactivity. So Mars, again, entering the pre-shadow phase October 4th. I think that changes the game, with again, a lot of conflicts that are happening across the world right now. I think a lot of conflicts are intensifying once Mars enters its pre-shadow phase. Again, a grand water trine though between Venus, Saturn, and Mars, and even the moon at one point, October 4th and 5th. So again, pushing through some kind of professional project, or making maybe a commitment in a relationship that has longevity. And then October 5th through 9th, we have Mercury opposite Chiron, trining Jupiter, and squaring Mars. So the Mercury Chiron opposition can, in a lot of ways, I think, oh, sorry, I'm switching by the hour there. The Mercury Chiron opposition can potentially bring up some painful conversations, but it can also help people sort of understand a little bit better, like maybe some kind of health issue they're going through. People maybe just seeking advice from certain healers at that time. But because Mars is also involved, it does feel like probably it's going to be more so on the side of like difficult conversations that pick away at insecurities. And with Mercury being local travel, and there's sort of when I think about Mercury, I think about like, transportation, vehicles. You have to wonder if there's some kind of like major car accident in the news between October 5th and 9th. Because like Mars square Mercury, like if I was born at this time, if I had a client, with October 7th, 2024, or 8th or 9th, like I would just tell them like, this is a bit of an accident prone chart, so you have to be more cautious when you're driving. So, this is a time period where people want to, you know, just be cautious behind the wheel. But I just think in the headline stories, you may see something about, I don't know if it's like a motorcycle or a car, but definitely feels like there's some kind of, maybe there's like a motorcade or something. But, maybe there's like a leader involved in that crash. But that's like the energy of that T square. And then again, Mars squares Chiron, really October 5th through 19th. So that's a long square because Mars is slowing down now because it's going to be stationing retrograde in about 2 months from now. So the Mars square Chiron, I've already described it, but it's defensive, it's protective, and it's reacting potentially to a volatile event with some sort of beloved leader, and all of their followers are suddenly like completely in a state of shock. And they're reacting with like maybe force. So again, it has kind of like a wartime sort of square, and it's like hypersensitive, honestly. It has that nature of, it's like any micro moments, like any no matter how minuscule it is, like any sort of implication that one country has bad intentions towards the other, or a leader maybe says something with a bit of vitriol or a bit of they say it in an aggressive way. It's like everything can be taken the wrong way. Everything can be hyperbolic or something. Everything can be taken as existential. And so it does feel like that whole square, that whole time that Mars is squaring Chiron, it's like a pin drops and suddenly the whole world changes, kind of thing. Or the geopolitical landscape changes at the drop of a pin. That's what it feels like. Venus opposes Uranus October 10th through 17th, which you can see here. This again may shake up the economy slightly. I hesitate to say that it would be some kind of like cataclysmic event with the economy because the markets have been like pretty steadily going up, for a long time, but I still think there could be some like reports of like top line numbers suggesting that consumer debt is worse than expected, credit card debt is, you know, worse than expected, or inflation is worse than expected, or something about the national debt having, well, I don't know if it's like a debt ceiling conversation as well. Um, with Uranus, it's a little bit unexpected. And Uranus is tech. So maybe there's like a tech company trying to buy out another tech company here. Um, and yeah, I mean, again, maybe like I said earlier, there's something with the housing market, some top line numbers that suggest the housing market is weakening. And I kind of say that because Pluto is stationing direct again at 29 Capricorn. And by the way, you can see that here on October 11th. So I do want to just quickly go back to that. And we did have Jupiter station retrograde a few days before October 11th. But October 11th is going to be a big day because you have the moon crossing by Pluto there, and then Pluto stations direct while the moon is in Aquarius. So the exact time, I mean, it's really the evening of October 11th. So there's a sense of momentum at that time, a sense of momentum towards transformation, again, of major brands, corporations, or leading figures in certain industries. And you may look at whether it's Hollywood or Washington, D.C., you may look at some of these epicenters of either culture or influence completely differently around October 11th. There could be like a really, really shocking news story. There could be something, and I think it has a lot to do with, again, the whole scandal with Diddy. I think that is, if you read my Substack, I already have a prediction of what's going to happen there for him specifically, but it just feels like regardless of, you know, what exactly happens with Diddy himself, I feel like the shockwaves coming out of that, I mean, it's significant, right? We've already seen, certain celebrities deleting their tweets or their Twitter accounts. So it's highly suspicious. And I mean, when I was doing research about this, I noticed that a lot of celebrities who are sort of like implicated in the scandal, a lot of them were born in the late 70s. And what's interesting about that is a lot of them have the South Node in Pisces. So they're going to have some of them, I'm not going to name names there, but like, you can do your own research there and connect the dots. But there are certain celebrities who have the South Node in Pisces from the late 70s. And they're going to have Saturn reach their South Node very soon. And I feel like that Saturn on the South Node is kind of a karmic reckoning. So I do think that some of the celebrities who are like most closely implicated in this, it's not that, if you have the South Node in Pisces, you have Saturn on your South Node right now. Obviously, like, it doesn't have to be existential, doesn't have to be a detriment per se, but a lot of times when the like South Node Saturn conjunction happens in your transits or in your birth chart, it's usually some past action catching up to you. Like that's the energy of Saturn transiting your South Node. Past action suddenly catching up. And if you talk to people with the South Node in Libra, which would be like, the early 80s, like, they've been or sorry. Let me go back to that. Let me go to a random date really quick in 1978 to confirm this. Yeah, okay. So this is a random date, by the way. Yeah, so the South Node in Pisces at that time, right? You can see that. So that's significant. And then yeah, ignore what I said about 1980, early 80s. That was actually the reverse. But it's still relevant. I mean, if you talk to people from the early 80s, they've had the South Node transiting their Saturn. And I think that transit has also, it's a slightly different effect, to reverse the planet, the celestial points or bodies like that. But the South Node conjunct Saturn also can have like this karmic reckoning effect. So anyways, I think the whole Diddy scandal is going to continue, obviously, to kind of like ripple out. So let's go through some other transits, but I could talk about Pluto stationing direct, for the whole episode today, and I would still have more to say. I mean, like the Pluto station like can be extremely significant, if not the most significant event of 2024. And think about, last time Pluto was direct at 29 Cap, and that was Cat Williams' interview with Shannon Sharp. That's when he said all lies will be exposed. And I think that's symbolic, like, of probably what's going to happen here. It's a harbinger of what's going to happen in mid-October. So maybe there is the exposure of something is disinterred. All of a sudden, this, I don't know, secret or hidden aspect of a certain organization or society or institution or public figure is suddenly revealed. Maybe again, it's more of a shock point in the economy, but it probably also has something to do with the wars going on right now. And I think if I'm really thinking, if I'm really just trying to drill down into the theme that I think people will remember and are most likely to experience, I think it has a lot to do with leaders that are currently in power or running for election, transitioning out of their position or leaving the stage or bowing out. Like I definitely see like there are some really significant leaders that are just no longer in the picture after October. And Pluto is transformation. It is that sort of metaphorical death and rebirth. And Capricorn is the sign that really rules over that sort of that infallible structure, that infallible manager, authority figure who's kind of ruling over everything. I mean, Leo has sort of that regal sort of quality to it, that sort of prince-like quality, but Capricorn is again the authority who is like seemingly indestructible. But Pluto is kind of saying, not really. It's not too indestructible for Pluto to come through. So I think that is a defining sort of characteristic of October. So anyways, Venus opposite Uranus definitely could shake some things up in the economy. The Sun Mars Chiron T-square is on October 13th, by the way. I want to highlight that. October 13th could, really be that moment, that day when a certain executive or leader suffers some kind of setback. Because like the sun has a lot to do with executives, with authorities. Chiron opposing the sun, Chiron receiving light from the sun in Aries is illuminating a leader, I think a leader who typically shows strength, but it's illuminating that leader in a moment of weakness. So a typically strong leader, a typically resilient leader suddenly shows weakness. Mars in the picture in Cancer there. Something is going on there, maybe with that leader, that has geopolitical implications, that has implications for, again, the wars that are currently happening. And even Jupiter there at 21 degrees. So all these activations of 21 degrees, right? And 21 is a Sagittarian degree. 21, Sagittarius. Sagittarius has a lot to do with belief, faith, travel. Yeah, and even like, just as a coincidence here, the midheaven I have for, just this arbitrary chart based in Los Angeles is 21 Pisces. The midheaven is 21 Pisces. So I don't think that's insignificant. I think that is a signal that, this day is sort of like a lock and key. It does feel like there's some kind of alignment that will be felt in the collective. And then Mars does begin to oppose Pluto October 15th, all the way through the end of the month. So I'll just demonstrate that for you. Again, it's slowing down. You're like, what the heck is going on with Mars? It should be moving faster. Well, no, it's because it's starting to align with the Earth from a heliocentric view, from our geocentric perspective. It's like, as Mars starts to shift closer and, or align itself with the Earth, we can't tell if it's moving forward or backwards. But yeah, Mars is getting frustrated here. It's slowing down. It's kind of getting exasperated, and it has to oppose Pluto in Capricorn, which is the sign of Mars's exaltation. So Mars would rather be in Capricorn. So not only is Mars fallen, but it's getting pummeled by Pluto. So Mars in Cancer opposing Pluto in Capricorn, it just feels like, that person who's just getting tormented and bullied for a long time, for years, and suddenly it's like they can't take it anymore and they react, and people are kind of surprised by it. Like that's what it feels like to me. So I don't like the energy of that at all. I think it's incredibly stubborn, incredibly resilient, but it's not the kind of resilience that you want. It's like the reactive resilience. It's kind of like, I'm tired of being pushed down. I'm tired of being picked on. But it's like, do you really? But that's not so great to witness at a collective scale, right? So kind of allow cooler heads to prevail around that time. And then I'm gonna like just skip the new and full moons until another section in a second here, but just for the sake of it, I mean, October 17th, there is an Aries full moon, and to me, that is the most important moment of the month. I would go so far as to say it might be the most important day of the year. Ultimately, I know I've said that about a few other days, like July 15th, Mars-Uranus conjunction, definitely a massive day, or at least time period. There's many others as well, like the Jupiter-Venus conjunction. But this full moon in Aries, to me, could take the cake by a mile, actually, because the ruling planet Mars, the ruling planet of Aries, and that full moon Mars is, again, fallen, opposing Pluto in this cardinal grand cross here, four-way stop sign. And it's like the four-way stop sign, it feels like a coagulation. It feels like an artery is being blocked, and I'll talk about why I'm using that analogy in a bit. But it just feels like something is no longer being able to like push through, or something is overheated or something. And a conflict is really, it's like something kind of curdling here. So yeah, again, really, honestly, really tough full moon. And then Mars trines Neptune, October 27th. Could be a nice time for acting out of compassion, pursuing some kind of humanitarian cause. Venus will square Saturn, October 26th till the end of the month. Some business-like discussions in relationships, but also maybe difficult decisions in relationships. Mercury will oppose Uranus in a grand trine with Mars and Neptune, October 30th. So I'll just quickly jump to that. I know I skipped some of the other days, but I do see some of those as being less important for the sake of this video. I mean, the Mercury Uranus opposition, kind of interesting there, because again, it's trining Mars and Neptune, sextiling Pluto trining Uranus. October 30th, I mean, it looks pretty good to me. That would be a really nice day to, I don't know, like really tap into your innovative side, come up with some new idea, especially on the spiritual level. Maybe there's some kind of interesting trend happening on the internet at that time that's visually appealing. I don't know, maybe this sounds kind of small, but like some kind of like really interesting ad campaign or branding, branded content around Halloween that just is kind of fascinating. So I don't think the end of the month has to be all bad, but but then remember that Mars is actually even more closely opposing Pluto. So, and we're a few days away from the election at that point. So, yeah, as you can see, based on the transits and my analysis of the transits, October is kind of brutal in a way. I mean, there's kind of a severity to it. It feels very severe. And I'll just kind of show you some of the titles I was kind of coming up with for this video. Um, no one is infallible. Breakdown of an empire. Fall of an empire. What goes up must come down. Fall from grace. Staying strong in a time of crisis. Um, Empires on high alert. Holding steady in a time of crisis. Stepping up to unprecedented challenges. New leaders chiseled by a sudden crisis. Emergence of new leaders in a time of crisis. So, I mean, that's the silver lining here. Like it does feel like the old guard is starting to bow out, but in the wake of that, there may be new leaders that play just a very pivotal role for the next few decades. Like it kind of gives me the energy of when Drew Bledsoe got injured for the New England Patriots back in like whatever 2000, and Tom Brady, stepped into his place, and he was, really like this really young kid from University of Michigan, and I don't think the expectations are very high. I think he was drafted like really late, right, in like the 6th round or something. But he ended up, winning however many Super Bowls, 6 or 7. So, it has that kind of like passing the torch type of energy. So even if there is some kind of shocking moment there where a leader is suddenly has exited, maybe there's a new leader coming in. So in your own life, I mean, you may have to step up in ways that you don't expect either. So you may have to become that leader. So let me just kind of summarize and encapsulate everything I've talked about, because I've been going through the transits in a sort of a piecemeal fashion. So I want to actually tell the story for you and actually flesh out a little bit of these predictions, or flesh these out a little bit more. So again, I mean, think about in your own mind an infallible person, organization, or figure, right? Like think about someone who is unbreakable, untouchable. This month, they might finally reveal severe weakness. And it could shake the internal stability among the followers of that leader. And then the question becomes, who fills that void? Who fills the vacuum? Who fills the vacuum? October is fundamentally about weaknesses being exposed at the highest levels of office across the world. So again, it's really the cresting of the themes surrounding Chiron in the North Node in Aries this year, which has been about aging leadership, vulnerable leadership, passing leadership, and the cascading impacts of those events, both domestically and abroad. So I really do foresee events like this occurring that inflame various factions, either in the Middle East, between Russia and Ukraine, but also in the West. And I think it's clear based on the astrology this month that tensions between Israel and Lebanon will only become more acute and drastic. I don't see the conflict subsiding anytime soon. Now, recall that this entire conflict began last October 7th when Mars was squaring Pluto and conjoining the South Node before a solar eclipse in Libra. Now, Mars has fallen in Cancer, where it was in detriment in Libra last year, by the way, and will actually square that position of Mars from October 7th in late October. So let's go to October 7th of 2023. So we'll make that chart 1, and then we'll make this, well, we'll just leave it on this for a second. So as you can see, once we get into mid-October, Mars is going to be squaring that position. And interestingly, just the chart I cooked up for October 7th of 2023 the moon was squaring Mars, moon at 26 degrees of Cancer. So, you can see there on the outer wheel, October of this year, especially around that Aries full moon, it does look like it's provoking further conflict related to that October 7th sort of, kickstarting of the entire conflict. And of course, again, Mars will be in a pre-shadow phase this month. And Mars did oppose Chiron as well, kind of loosely last October, as you can see on the chart. But this time it's going to enter the pre-shadow zone in a tight square with Chiron, and eventually grinding backwards into a retrograde square and stationing direct in a square to Chiron in mid to late February of next year. So, yeah, look to the Middle East this month. I think that, as you saw, I think, or maybe you didn't see, but in the news today, China was recommending that its citizens leave Israel. So, like, there is this anticipation of major conflict, which again, there has been conflict for a long time, but I just think it reaches a new level that may get other countries involved. And again, I think that some of the conflict, some of the escalation will be sort of precipitated by potentially a leader of like maybe a certain group or a certain faction or a certain country, you know, suddenly having a setback, suddenly exiting, suddenly, disappearing. And look at that Aries full moon. It's the sun is on the south node, close to that Mars position from October 7th. The full moon is on the north node. So there's something karmic or something fated, I should say. There's something destined about mid-October. It's like going to change the whole nature of the conflict. And I think especially the Middle East. And we even have, Venus squaring Venus from last year. There's a lot of hearkenings back to that time. So now I want to focus on potentially the biggest prediction that I've had this year. And I think the presidential race in the United States reaches a severe turning point that will likely change the presidential ticket. So the Aries full moon, to me, suggests a change in Trump. A change that may involve some type of health setback for him. It may prevent him from running. It may be a health-related matter, particularly related to circulation. And this would, of course, completely upturn the election. And, applying a bit more of my psychic senses here. Applying a bit more of a psychic sense. I wonder, if it has something to do, I'm just getting this like signal that has something to do with like, maybe he's like having energy drinks a lot, or it has something to do with like I remember there's a story in 2017 that he would have like 12 Diet Cokes a day. I think like something I just kept getting a download the last few days that it may have something to do with like his diet, right? His health practices. But like specifically there's something with like an energy drink, or like the like soda or something, but it's like really getting like sort of somehow it's affecting either circulation, heart health, things like that. So, and I was feeling that even when I looked at the Cardinal Grand Cross, it feels like there's like sort of a stagnation, a coagulation of some kind. And, that's partly the theme of Chiron and Aries. Go back to 1968. Like there has been this theme of like leaders just suddenly, bowing out. And, I was actually researching the that whole topic. I was like, is there something with like Trump and energy drinks somewhere online? But when I searched that, I found like that story about him having 12 Diet Cokes a day, and that story was primarily published on December 11th of 2017. So watch what happens when you sort of merge these charts. So if I look at December 11th, 2017, which is when a lot of media outlets were reporting, his, again, diet and lifestyle, you can see here, Uranus was at 24 Aries. The full moon in Aries on October 17th is right on that Uranus position. And we also have like Saturn conjunct Neptune. We have, the south node close to the moon at that time. I mean, there's a lot of things going on there. Pluto at that time opposing Mars there. But I think the biggest thing here is Uranus and Aries. At that moment, when those stories were coming out, that I would argue that kind of symbolizes his lifestyle in that domain. We have a full moon in Aries, like right on that Uranus, which is unexpected. So to me, like this is the really deep astrology that I think lends a little bit of credence to this idea that there may be some kind of like effect, on him at that time. But if I was also to look at his chart, which I don't have right immediately available, but if you look at his chart, his birth chart, what's going on at this time? Well, Mars is going to be on his Saturn. Mars is going to be at the same position the sun was in on July 13th during his rally in Pennsylvania. And Aries, it rules the head, but he's also a Leo rising. He has, Uranus continuing to square his natal Mars, and like the transiting Mars here squares the moon and squares Chiron in Aries. It just feels like there's a lot of potential like circulatory issues. Like that's just what I'm seeing here. So yeah, and by the way, like if you subscribe to my Substack, I've already talked about this back in July. So I was actually talking about this full moon back in July, middle of July, and actually even before Biden even dropped out. I was talking about my presidential predictions, and so far my presidential prediction seems to be on track. But if you want to access that prediction, then check out my Substack. Paid subscribers to my Substack will have access to my presidential prediction, which I'm not going to mention here, but because I did a lot of research to come up with that. But just for the sake of this video, I do see like I just think that the presidential ticket changes after October 17th. I just feel like October 17th, like there's some kind of turning point there with Trump. I think it's health related, and there's something that I think will obviously aggravate Trump's base. And then Mars is going to retrograde back to 29 degrees of Cancer on January 6th, 2025, which is, I'll show you, squaring the position of Mars on January 6th, 2021, which was obviously a significant date in US history. So if I was to show you that and then change this chart really quickly to Jan 6, 2025, I mean, you see it right there. Right when Mars goes back into Cancer retrograde, 29 degrees, a really unwieldy degree, squaring Mars at 29 degrees of Aries, which, by the way, was after a retrograde in Aries. So if I was to go back to October, I'm just making up a date here, but like if you go back to October of 2020, you can see Mars was retrograde in Aries that year. So changing it again to Jan 6, 2021, there's an interesting parallel, and 11:11 on the clock right now, by the way, local time as I'm speaking. That gives me even more sort of confirmation that there's something happening here on January 6, 2025 in the United States that, I don't want to be too hyperbolic there, but like it does feel like there's almost like a civil war conflict kind of like that's almost like hinted at there. Mars squaring that natal Mars, on that 4-year anniversary, Pluto on the Saturn, on the natal Saturn, Mercury on Venus, and the lunar nodes just about to switch. Like, so there's a very fated element to that because they're going to switch into Pisces and Virgo on Jan 11. But when the North node is like just at that 0-degree point, which is a major powerful point in astrology, it does feel to me like that's a reaction maybe to something that happened on election day or something that happened with Trump back in October where it feels like it's an unfair, like his base feels like it's an unfair outcome or something because of something that happened to Trump. I think October 17th, there's some kind of domino effect. And really the domino effect was many months ago. But like, yeah, I mean, I just think the US is going to experience a lot of political discord as the two parties become more entrenched. It gets existential to me. And then Uranus moves into Gemini next year. Uranus was in Gemini during the US Civil War in the 1860s. So again, there's a lot going on there. And obviously I'll continue to cover this through like my podcast, my Substack, but for the sake of the YouTube video, I think I've sort of laid out that prediction pretty clearly. So I'm gonna, so yeah, again, this is to me like that's the crux of October. Like I think that Aries full moon October 17th is again just that massive shock point. So I want to talk about just really quickly again. I just want to talk about the Diddy scandal. I think this is important. This is a reckoning for Hollywood, and that will continue to really accelerate as Pluto stations direct in Capricorn. Again, all lies will be exposed kind of energy. Nobody is infallible. Nobody is unflappable. Nobody is beyond the sort of reaches of Pluto's sort of piercing gaze, like that's sort of the energy of it. I think many celebrities attached to him, born in the late 70s, South Node in Pisces. So that transit next year when Saturn reaches some of their South nodes, because some of those celebrities I'm mentioning, they have their South node at like 25 degrees of Pisces and things like that. So that Saturn conjunction next year could dredge up all kinds of karma for them. And on a personal level, I know I've been talking much more about, global forecasts, but, relationships can enter a karmic transition for you. There could also be many substantive financial discussions for you during this month. Because of the solar eclipse in Libra, resetting contracts, conjunct Mercury, and Venus, the ruling planet of Libra, being in Scorpio for much of the month. So I think a lot of people will have financially significant discussions, but they may also nullify certain contracts. And yeah, so before I talk about that eclipse, though, just some other, just to wrap up my global predictions. I think there could be some housing market troubles, some election-related pandemonium, key figures on the political stage bowing out, sparking greater conflict, celebrity culture, Hollywood losing traction and influence, increasingly feeling out of touch. I think a lot of brand deals may be nullified and terminated based on the Diddy scandal. There's an escalation of conflict in the Middle East to a point of no return. And I think there's some conflicts and drama coming up within like prominent families. I don't know if it's like the royal family or someone else, but there's almost like clashes over fortunes, resources, and assets. So now I want to talk about the new and full moons just from a bit more of a personal standpoint for how you can prepare. So this month is defined by a lunation cycle that I think is very powerful. I mean, it's an eclipse, right? Or it starts off with a solar eclipse. And this is a solar annular eclipse, meaning you'll still see a ring of fire around the moon there. The sun will still be partially visible, but it is still, a pretty powerful eclipse. And in Libra, this is the second solar eclipse in Libra we've had in this cycle. So think back to last October 14th. I'll add that chart really quick. That was sorry, just quickly, I will put that on here. So think back to that time. Where were you on October 14th? What were some of the themes that you encountered? This is not your first go around with this type of eclipse in this cycle. So the hope would be that you kind of already understand like how to evaluate your relationships that are stagnant and out of they've lost their growth potential, and which relationships are truly still elevating your sort of are helping you evolve or whatnot. So I think this eclipse will be really an empowering time for some of you, where you may validate some of your relationships and realize that you've been doing the work, working on yourself, and now you're finally in a much better position. So maybe during this eclipse, you simply reflect on how far you've come over the past year. Maybe a year ago, you were in a really terrible relationship, and now you're not in that position. Maybe for some of you, if you've been holding on to the wrong relationships, Maybe it will be a tough eclipse for you where you have to flush those out. But I think if you've been watching my videos and you've been keeping up with the sort of themes that I've been tracking all year, it should be already pretty obvious to you what relationships are healthy and unhealthy. Because Mercury's involved, maybe you will actually vocalize some of your dissatisfaction in a relationship and want to end it. Mercury will square Mars. Some arguments could come up there. But I think with like Venus and Scorpio as well, and like with Venus, of course, ruling this solar eclipse because it rules Libra, I think that for a lot of you, you could just have some really pivotal financial talks, either about a contract, a brand deal, signing a new business partner, um, buying a house. And of course, like during the actual moment of an eclipse, it's usually not recommended that you set intentions or try to manifest something. But as I've talked about in my podcast recently and on my Substack, I mean, I still think you can set intentions as long as you're working consciously with your karma and your dharma. So the north and south nodes in your birth chart, north and south node transiting, what are they doing? Are you working on them? If yes, then I think you can work with these eclipses. So yeah, I mean, the solar eclipse could really set a new tone with some kind of contract negotiation or relationship for you. So yeah, I mean, it could be financially empowering in a lot of ways. And again, I don't think it has to be all negative. It doesn't have to be like this terrible surprise that caught you off guard. I mean, I think that was more so last October. I think last October was a lot more reactive for people. People may have just suddenly been, again, out of a relationship or surprised by the disintegration of a relationship and scrambling. But because you've kind of have a been there, done that attitude with this eclipse, hopefully, like, again, you've already become acquainted with the South Node in Libra. This can be your sort of proverbial coming of age moment where, oh, now I realize why, it didn't work out last time, or now I understand like the types of relationships I want, and now I am a better negotiator. And like with the North Node and Aries, I think we can all benefit at this time from just standing inside of our own self-worth, self-love, self-respect. It doesn't mean like, everyone is just going to be independent only and like not in relationships. It just means that you'll approach either the negotiating table or the relationship with a really solid sense of self. So in the best case scenario, people are actually self-actualizing through their relationships. So, yeah. And now let's talk about the full moon in Aries. So that full moon in Aries, October 17th. I talked about this primarily with regards to Trump, but other, leaders, I mean, maybe it's Biden even, like there's other leaders here who could experience a major setback. But also with this Aries full moon, just in addition to everything I said about the worldly predictions for you, this eclipse is, regardless of your sun, moon, or rising, I think this eclipse, or sorry, it's not an eclipse. This full moon could be incredibly aggravating, and I talk about taking inspired action on full moons if you want, like acting in the present moment and following the signs and signals. That is not the case here. Like you don't really want to take inspired action. Inspired action on this Aries full moon is just like completely batshit crazy. Like it just feels like people are overreacting to things, taking everything as a slight. You may want to just kind of like shy away from any sorts of conflict prone situations with a lot of variables that you can't anticipate or control. I mean, Jupiter is trining the sun, sextiling the moon, sextiling Chiron. So, there's some nice energy there, but for the most part, this just looks awful. It looks really bad. I mean, I just think that you want to avoid conflict here, but it could put you through some kind of pressure cooker that like, it sort of tests you in a way that really like ultimately helps you, like tests your mettle, and suddenly you've proven yourself to be strong, resilient, and capable of leadership. So, I mean, there may be some like new leaders that emerge from this time. But as I just said, like it could almost be volatile and explosive. Like it does feel very angry. It doesn't feel good to me at all. So yeah, October is pretty rough. It makes September look really tame. I mean, I'd be pretty shocked if like we get through October and there's like really nothing to talk about. Not only because it's an election cycle, but because of the astrology. Now, will there be an impact, a unique impact for each sign? Are there ways for each sign to take advantage of the energy and not have a bad time? Of course. But I think globally we're going to be pretty sucked into all the chaos. But I'm going to I'm going to start to talk about the forecasts for each sign. So for this video, I've gone like pretty far in. I've leaned into the global forecast for a reason. I think the global predictions will really shape the month, and it's not that you can't do things on a personal level. I will talk about some in a second. But these horoscopes are going to be a little bit more brief than usual because I do want to, again, mostly just zero in on how you can avoid some of the negatives of like that full moon in Aries, especially, but also how you can approach the eclipse. I'm not going to get super into the weeds with all the other transits today with regards to this horoscope section, but you do want to, reference your sun, moon, and rising sign with priority given to your rising sign, then your sun sign, then your moon sign. So let's start off with Aries, which I think is a good sign to start with because the eclipses will really affect you. So I'll share my screen again. So working from Aries and moving forward, and I'm showing you, by the way, the full moon in Aries on the screen, but I will talk about the solar eclipse I'll just think about where it is in my mind. So for Aries, this month is really about your self-actualization journey. You are coming into your own and maybe purging some relationships, but also finding relationships that respect your autonomy. And during the solar eclipse, October 2nd, that could be either the beginning of a new relationship or contract negotiation or business partnership, or yes, it could be the conclusion of a relationship. But I think for a lot of Aries, this has everything to do with, I think, a contract negotiation that may have some financial implications because you have Venus in the 8th house there. So, if I was an Aries, I would really be aiming for, I would just like be talking with advisors, mentors, consultants, uh, business associates, or, if you're married, like a marriage partner, but like really hone in on your financial strategy at this time and interface with people one-on-one in order to finesse your financial strategy. And then the Aries full moon on October 17th is in your sign or in your first house. So that's definitely an emotional moment of release. You may feel a little agitated there. Don't get too angry though. Otherwise you're going to cause a little bit of wreckage and chaos. You don't want to be that person. So, like, I wouldn't try to do too much on this full moon. I would actually try to rest and relax. Don't overstress yourself. And I do see potential here for like a little bit of conflict in the home or with the family. So if your family gets on your nerves easily, definitely avoid them. So now let's talk about Taurus risings. Taurus risings, you have the solar eclipse in Libra, October 2nd, in your 6th house. So that could be a totally new dynamic at work with coworkers, with work projects. You could negotiate a new sort of like workflow, work project, a new schedule, different hours. You could also focus on your health, your wellness, and balance out your lifestyle. So for Tauruses, you could take a totally different approach to like your exercise routines, your health regimen, your diet. And then with Venus in the 7th, the ruling planet of that solar eclipse, you may experience a bit more balance in your relationships. Kind of like Aries, you could be having financial discussions with people, business partners, yeah, I think that like the relationships you have at this time or that you're building at this time have a lot of depth to them, or maybe some kind of financial implication. And with Mars in the third, you're feeling very talkative, analytical, sometimes argumentative. But then we have, so again, the solar eclipse has a lot to do with balance of your lifestyle between health and work, and also achieving balance within your work projects. The Aries full moon, October 17th, is in your 12th house of spirituality, isolation, reflection, past lives. So for Tauruses, the Aries full moon could be a time where your sleep is very disrupted, but I think a lot of you will have dreams that are incredibly vivid, maybe slightly Martian, maybe meaning they're a little bit aggressive dreams, but I think it's a very healing moment, spiritually healing. You could focus on your mental well-being as well, but my cautionary sort of advice for you as a Taurus is to avoid any reckless nighttime activities on that night. Um, like again, meditating, relaxing, recuperating is a better idea there than don't go out late that night and just don't go out and drink or something. Like just feels like that would be a really bad idea. And the ruling planet Mars is in the third. So yeah, be cautious while driving for sure. If you have any siblings who you don't get along with, avoid them that day. If you have any neighbors you don't get along with, avoid them that day. Really any relatives in a lot of ways, just that you don't get along with, avoid them. And you may feel, again, slightly argumentative. So another reason to just like cool it on this full moon. But hopefully this illuminates the really the energy you want to direct towards your spirituality or even a humanitarian project. And with Aries in this 12th house here, like could be acting on behalf of others. You could be demonstrating courage in a sacrificial way. So Gemini's, the solar eclipse in Libra, October 2nd, is in your 5th house of creativity, romance, joy, amusements. So the solar eclipse here is, to me, a time where you're kind of like just setting a new tone with your creative life, maybe with your romantic life. Maybe you walk away from a situationship, maybe you welcome one into your life. And a relationship that if you entered into one at this time, I think that romantic fling may have some karma attached to it. They may have a past life connection with you. With Venus in the 6th, you could be well, if I were a Gemini, I would actually I would really avoid like dating your coworker or something like that, because it kind of feels that way here. Like maybe there's something like going on there, something kind of enticing, but like you probably shouldn't do it. Venus in the 6th could help you balance out your lifestyle, your daily routines, but avoid gossip with any coworkers also at that moment. But ultimately, I think for Geminis, you're probably going to be really like resetting your creative life. And by the way, the eclipse like really sets a new course and energy for up to 6 months. So you could start to work through some kind of creative thing, creative hobby that carries you through for the next 6 months. And the Aries full moon, October 17th, is in your 11th house. So conjunct Chiron, the Aries full moon could really mess with a friendship. You could have like a falling out with a friend, an argument with a friend, or within an organization or on social media. So if you're a Gemini, really avoid arguments and conflicts on social media, in any group settings, and with any friends. I like avoid any of those conflicts with your friends. But in a positive sense, you could use this to yeah, maybe heal some kind of situation with a friend, experience a friendship that makes you feel seen and loved. And, you can recapture that self-love through a friendship. And the ruling planet of Aries, Mars, is in the second house. So maybe some of you will have a financial dispute with a friend or something like that. Hopefully not. And maybe some Geminis are performing or doing something in front of a group, which is the 11th house, in a way that is very healing for you. So yeah, and a lot of Geminis, you got some stress going on with your career, and Jupiter retrograde in Gemini at this time. You're kind of reflecting on some opportunities and learning moments from the year. But yeah, again, just aim for healing within friendships. Avoid the arguments with the friends. Cancers, the solar eclipse in Libra, October 2nd, is in your fourth house. So that's big for you. I mean, that's really going to probably change your perspective on property or your family. And with the conjunction with Mercury at that time, wouldn't be surprised if some of you are aiming to like acquire property, sell property. Yeah, I think a lot of you could experience that, or you're having a discussion with a family member that's just very, yeah, financially significant or important, or you're talking to a family member you haven't spoken to in a while, or, again, you just see your family completely differently at that time. Venus, the ruling planet of Libra, is in the fifth house. So you could be experiencing an uptick in creativity, or maybe there's a little bit of more romance in your life at that time. And Mars in your first house. So you're a little bit more prone to aggression and arguments at this time, but I think in a positive sense, it could really like that eclipse could really help you like find a place you want to move to, or again, you could reconcile with a family member. And then the Aries full moon, big for you. It's in your 10th house, October 17th. The Aries full moon could be a transition in your career. You may get into a very public display of, I don't know, agitation. Like you might, get into an argument at work or with an authority figure or a parent. But again, with Chiron being about healing, you could heal your self-image by, well, you could gain self-respect by standing up against an authority figure, or standing up against a parent who, you haven't gotten along with, and just being like, no, like, I'm gonna set a boundary here. I'm going to respect myself, and I want you to respect me. Like you could really, prove yourself as maybe as having your own parental potential. Like you could become a parent, or you could prove your um you could gain respect as a parent if you are a parent. And maybe some of you will again transition your responsibilities. Maybe you'll realize that you want to have a career as a healer. I mean, Chiron on the 10th can kind of be that way. But yeah, like for cancers, expect to maybe have a bit of a clash there with some people you either look up to, some role models and authority figures, but also you could step into an authority position by healing your relationship with those authority figures. So Leo, the solar eclipse in Libra, October 2nd, is in your third house of communication, writing, siblings, neighbors, local travel. So Leo risings, October 2nd, you could be taking a really pivotal like road trip. You could be talking to a sibling again. You could become inspired to, start some kind of new writing project at that time. You could be having conversations with people from your past, whether that's through like text messages, phone calls, emails. And you could be having a discussion with someone about, I don't know, about what to do about a relationship or even a property. I mean, Leo, you have Venus in the fourth. So a lot of Leos, you're investing in property. You are um, just changing your property, beautifying it, renovating it, decorating it. But yeah, other Leos, I think you could just be with that solar eclipse you could be in a really busy phase of the year where with Mercury in the third, you're just like, signing a lot of paperwork, getting all these appointments and bookings done, and just coming up with all these new ideas. I think for Leos, it's just a really busy time, but also don't be surprised if you take some kind of local trip. And then the Aries full moon, October 17th, is in your ninth house of long distance trips, philosophy, worldview, higher education. So for Leos, you could come to a decision or reach a conclusion with some kind of educational pursuit. You could enroll in a different higher educational institution. You could adopt a totally different worldview. You could, yeah, complete an educational journey. You could also return from a trip or realize that you want to take a trip at some point soon. The ruling planet Mars is in the 12th house, so your sleep cycle continues to be disrupted. I bet a lot of Leo risings are watching this video at like 1 a.m. or something. Your sleep has not been great because Mars has been in your 12th house. But that Aries full moon may just sort of, change your habits in a way. I mean, maybe some of you are just coming back from a trip and realizing you need to relax and rest. But I think for a lot of you, it could be like this educational milestone, or you are maybe doing something in the publishing space, like maybe you're publishing some kind of book or media project, or realizing that you want to get something published. So yeah, I think that's again just some of the essential experiences of Leos, not the entire. This is not obviously the entire experience of a Leo, but like I said at the midpoint of this video, I've chosen not to fully dive into every minuscule transit this time, because I think that the global predictions kind of speak for themselves. Like, I think you can kind of almost like look at those global predictions and think about, okay, well, knowing that these things may be coming, like, how do I want to like really hold steady? Because I think that a lot of the global news events will kind of overshadow some of the activities in October on a personal level. It kind of feels like we're all in this sort of like we are living history right at this time. So, anyways, Virgos, the solar eclipse in Libra, October 2nd, is in your second house of money, personal values, innate talents, self-worth. So some Virgos may agree to a new salary, may change their salary, may start to focus on their financials a little bit differently. You might also, realize that you want to deploy your natural talents differently at your job. But I think for a lot of Virgos, this is a financial reset. You're taking a different approach to spending, hopefully improving your salary, but really thinking about the inflows and outflows of money. Other Virgos, I think with Libra in the second, it could be just like an emphasis on creativity, and just like, focusing on your natural talents in the creative realm. Venus, the ruling planet, is in the third house. So some Virgos may invest time into a creative writing project, or, may just be having a lot of like really financially beneficial conversations at this time. So if you're a Virgo, I would actually just kind of like put yourself out there and like have a lot of conversations with people, because some of those conversations could lead to like a financial upside. Then the Aries full moon, October 17th, is in the eighth house of shared investments, assets, the taboo, transformation, physical intimacy. So that full moon in Aries in the eighth, it's kind of intense, right? It has like a really big sort of sense of tension. And for that reason, I think as a Virgo, you kind of want to chill out during this full moon, because it does feel like whether it's a financial dispute or a relationship that just kind of goes awry, where suddenly you just don't feel like you can connect with someone on a deep level, you don't feel like you can trust them, or you're sort of like digging into your own subconscious, and recovering some kind of memory that's really agitating. It just feels like a bit of a harsh full moon for you. But you could heal some kind of financial insecurity at this time as well. Hopefully through that new salary that you're attracting. And then Mars, which rules Aries, is in the 11th house of friends and communities. So, you may experience a little bit of tension in that 11th house of friends and groups, but you could also, on a positive side, really demonstrate some kind of like leadership or courageousness in a group or community. So now for Libras, and hang on just a second. I had to adjust something quick, but now for Libras, the solar eclipse is in your sign on October 2nd. So that is definitely a major karmic reset, karmic change, especially with regards to relationships, and you're flushing out any relationships that don't serve your growth or that hold you back. And you're really going to be standing up for yourself more firmly during this month. And again, either finding relationships that respect your independence, or walking away from some relationships and realizing that you're okay on your own at this point. But I do think a lot of Libras are going to be having, again, financially substantive discussions, because Venus, the ruling planet of Libra, is in the second house of money. So Libras, you could be acquiring a new job. You could be aligning yourself with a new business partner. You could be merging assets with a marriage partner, or uncoupling from them and, divesting from all these things. But Libras, this is a redefinition of who you are. It's really a redefinition. And I think it can be a nice refresh in that way. And with Mercury in the first house at that time, you're very much able to communicate your needs. The Aries full moon, October 17th, is in the 7th house. So, again, some of you might let go of a significant relationship or a business partnership. Suddenly, you may realize that you can't trust somebody. You may feel betrayed by somebody with Chiron in the 7th. And in some ways, the same goes for Aries placements, actually. So that's something I didn't talk about for Aries, that section of the horoscope. I mean, some Aries may feel betrayed, but you can also heal something as an Aries and sort of achieve self-love. So yeah, for Libras, you're definitely cleaning house with any relationships that don't work for you anymore. But you can find some financially empowering relationships, or you could just even like meet with a healer or a shaman and heal that way. And then Mars is in the 10th house, so you're feeling more bold in your career, taking big steps forward in your career. And that leads me to wonder, maybe some of you are getting a new job, or maybe you just are proving yourself in your career. So now we have Scorpio. Scorpio, you have the Libra solar eclipse October 2nd in your 12th house. So this is some kind of reset with your spiritual life, maybe your meditation practices, maybe you are reflecting on your past or your past lives differently. Maybe you are letting go of some relationships from your that have, ran out of growth potential. Maybe you're welcoming relationships from your past or your past lives into your life. With Venus being in the first house, I think that's a really creative time as well, though, for you. If you wanted to like create something artistic or come up with some really new creative idea, I think that like you could do that at this time, but like it could come through a meditation, or it could come through some kind of spiritual ritual or practice. Yeah, Scorpios are going to be focusing on balancing out your sleep cycle as well with that 12th house, your circadian rhythms, and just like improving maybe even your mental well-being. But I think it should be not so bad for you just because Venus is in the first house. So there's a focus again on relationships, creativity, maybe money and finance as well. Like I think around like this whole month, really, like, or at least while Venus is in Scorpio, the first half of the month, you could be attracting new financial opportunities. Um, but yeah, I think of that Libra solar eclipse as being very abstract, very much a reset of your spiritual life and a focus really on karma through the lens of your relationships. So again, are the relationships in your life putting you in a risky position where it could be like like an unraveling karmically, or are they helping you improve your mental well-being, your spiritual growth is being facilitated by that relationship, etc. The Aries full moon, October 17th, is not easy. It's in your 6th house of health. So as a Scorpio, like you should really, not overstrain yourself. This is like a physical healing type of full moon. So like don't overdo it at the gym, don't overextend yourself. Um, avoid any arguments or agitation with coworkers. And yeah, really focus on your healing journey, even on a physical level at this time. But again, don't strain your body at that moment. The ruling planet Mars is in the 9th house. So yeah, Mars in the 9th, you could take a big step to prove yourself as a teacher, an educator. You could take a sort of a bold step to travel somewhere new, but I think the Aries energy in the 6th house is really going to dominate here. Like this is very much about rehabilitating, healing, finally owning up to a health challenge that you may have. A health challenge that maybe you've had since February when Chiron and the North Node, were conjunct. So Sagittarius, you have the solar eclipse in Libra in your 11th house, October 2nd. So yeah, for you, like for Libra or Sagittarius, like you could absolutely, walk away from a friendship that is no longer serving your growth. You could, maybe even reconnect with a friend from your past. You could experience a total course change in groups or communities that you're a part of. If you're on social media, there could be some major brand deal that you sign, or your social media trajectory could change, hopefully for the better. And the ruling planet Venus is in the 12th house. So yeah, Venus in the 12th does have a behind the scenes feel with relationships. So, you could be forming relationships with people you have a past life connection with. Or you could be tempted to get into some kind of behind the scenes or secretive relationship. Obviously, you want to avoid that. Um, because I think anything in that domain could like really create drama with your friends or your friendships. So yeah, but I hopefully this is like a good reset for you with your friends. And then the full moon in Aries, October 17th, is in the 5th house of romance and creativity. So unfortunately, some Sagittariuses may feel betrayed or rejected by someone on a date, but you may also heal yourself through that date. Like maybe you go on a date with someone who's been through a similar healing journey as you, or they share their vulnerabilities with you and they encourage you to do the same. You could heal yourself through creativity or creative projects. You could complete a creative project at this time. The ruling planet Mars is in the 8th. So avoid financial disputes and conflicts at that time. I mean, maybe with Mars in the 8th, some of you are like really trying to take a bold step to try to invest in real estate or change something about your finances. But I think a lot of Sages are getting into like a lot of disputes over property. I mean, you have Saturn in the 4th, right? So a lot of you are looking for long-term property. Yeah, I mean, I think the message is pretty clear for Sages. Like, really, like, if you want a certain property right now, like, really try to get ahead of this full moon because this full moon kind of feels like it's like the energy of like seeing a property you love on Zillow and like someone gets it sooner than you, like right before you. and you're really pissed off about it and you wish you had looked sooner. So like if you're after some kind of property, like look sooner than October 17th. If you're not after that, like consider the other themes I mentioned. Healing through creativity, maybe healing through a date that goes really well for you. Capricorn, big eclipse moment for you. The solar eclipse in Libra, October 2nd, is in your 10th house of career. So for Capricorns, you could change jobs. You could change your responsibilities. You could change your professional connections or your connections with authority figures. You could reconnect with authority figures from your past. But I think for a lot of you, it is a job change, or you're letting go of a job you don't want anymore. I mean, hopefully you're not losing your job, like, but you know, you really want to like anticipate some kind of job change at this time. Or again, a change in your maybe even role as an authority figure. Like some Capricorns, you could step into a parenting role, change the way you think about parenting, or change the way you manage others. The ruling planet Venus is in the 11th house. So you could also be socializing a lot with friends. But you know, as I'm just flowing through this, like I think it's probably the best approach you could take is like going to a conference or a networking event, networking with the right people who have the right connections for you, and getting a new job through that. That's what you should do. And then the Aries full moon, October 17th, is in your 4th house of home and family. So maybe some agitation with a family member there, maybe even a health issue coming up in your family. Some of you, though, could be healing your dynamics with a family member. Some of you could be moving homes or thinking about your home differently. But I think that's like a major change in your family. And maybe the conclusion of something in your family that came up in early April during the solar eclipse in Aries. The ruling planet Mars is in the 7th house here, so you could experience some conflict in your significant relationships, but you could also take the initiative to start a new relationship or sell something. I think Mars in the 7th sometimes can like really sell. You can be very persuasive and very a strong negotiator. So not a bad time for standing up for yourself or being, again, a very firm negotiator with something. Maybe it's property related, maybe it's with your family, maybe it's regarding a new job. So Aquarius, the solar eclipse in Libra, October 2nd, is in your 9th house. The 9th house of teaching, higher education, long distance traveling, publishing, philosophy, worldview. Aquarius, I mean, the 9th house sometimes can be very subtle for people. So, you know, and let me actually really quickly back up a day just to get this Venus placement in the right spot. So the 9th house solar eclipse, I mean, it could be that you book a trip. You could be going on a long distance trip that really improves your relationships. Maybe someone you go on the trip with ends up becoming a really strong friend or even a partner. You could also change your perspective on your educational path and where you want to go there. You know, it could be a major change in your worldview. But you know, I feel like a lot of you are probably thinking about some kind of long distance trip. But you know, Venus, the ruling planet, is in your 10th, so maybe you are adopting a more creative role at your job. Maybe you're improving your connections with authority figures at your job. Uh, yeah, I think like, and anything you do in the public eye is seen as more sort of is seen as more is seen more favorably, I guess you could say. But you know, other Aquariuses, yeah, you could, you know, you could again start a new educational course in some way. But I think apart from the trip, I think a lot of you, it's more about reshaping your worldview. I think the Aries full moon could be more significant in some respects in that third house. In that regard, maybe some of you are completing a writing project, actually, a writing project that is very healing for you. Maybe some of you are going on a short distance trip or coming back from a trip. Avoid arguments at that time, avoid tense conversations. Some of you may get into a bit of a conflict with a sibling or neighbor. The ruling planet, Mars, is in the 6th, which could strain your health a little bit. So be careful, like when you're exercising, don't overextend yourself. Don't argue with coworkers. There could be some tension with them. Yeah, as an Aquarius, like really pick your battles, avoid unnecessary arguments. But yeah, as I'm kind of like looking at the chart for you, the solar eclipse might actually be a little bit bigger. I mean, it could be like if you're really trying to, advance further at your job. This is not a bad time because you could be seen more favorably at your job. But also for Aquarius, this is really good if you're looking to integrate more creativity into your job. But yeah, I think a lot of Aquarius is you're having very powerful, potent conversations in mid-October during that full moon in Aries. It's just that those conversations could get a little bit heated. So, maintain poise and composure during those moments. Pisces, your investing life may change because the solar eclipse in Libra is in your 8th house. So this could change the way you could merge your assets with someone who you're dating or married to. You could change your financial strategy with a business partner. You could redefine your investing strategy, like I said. This is also about intimacy, though, the 8th house. You could experience a transformative relationship that is physically intimate and maybe has a past life connection. Others will kind of like look into their subconscious differently, do shadow work. And the ruling planet of Libra, Venus, is in the 9th. Some of you could invest in a long distance trip. Some of you could pay off debt with a college program or something. Others could invest in a course or an educational program. And I think Pisces, you're really looking into any debt you may be carrying. You could be taking out a loan of some kind. And again, you really could deepen your relationships actually on a physical level. And then the Aries full moon, October 17th, is in your 2nd house of money, resources, self-worth. So that full moon could, for some Pisces, you could be changing your salary there. You could also awaken to your values even in a different way. The 2nd house is values. You may value Aries things like courage, leadership more strongly. You could experience a little bit of a dent in your self-worth, or you could reclaim it. That kind of depends on your individual chart and your attitudes at the time. The ruling planet Mars is in the 5th house of creativity and joy and romance. So some Pisces could be forging ahead with some kind of creative project, or you could be putting yourself out there a little bit more in the dating world. I mean, yeah, some Pisces could have very enticing relationships and romantic connections during this month. Could be kind of a spicy dating period for you. So that concludes the horoscope section. And thank you for sticking with me today. October, as you can kind of gather from the video, is very much overshadowed by global events. Like energetically, I'm not really feeling the need to dive into the individual horoscopes quite as much. It's not that they're not important. It's not that things aren't happening in your life. But I would say, just think about the eclipse and the full moon as moments to potentially improve your financial prospects through your connections, whether it's a friend or a partner or a business partner. Realize which relationships in your life you can, like which relationships can you go deep with and which ones are superficial. You will be answering that question. And do not allow yourself to become overwhelmed around the full moon or overstressed, because Mars is in pre-shadow at that point. So a lot of people on the full moon in Aries could kind of just like have a short fuse and lose their cool, and just like, you don't want to be that person. Um, but if you see people in your life losing their cool, or yeah, not being able to control themselves, then you can step up and be the leader and be the decisive one. So, you can step into some kind of leadership potential this month, but only if you demonstrate resilience during this time of crisis, because I think October is a time of crisis. I don't use that lightly. I think it really is a time of crisis. Politically, geopolitically, in terms of war and global catastrophe. So it's not an easy month, but tough times create tough people. So I think, again, new leaders will be chiseled by the stress and the crises that will unfold at this time. And look to the Aries ruled house of your birth chart to find the area where you can step up and be bold and be courageous, right? And look to the house of your birth chart where you have Libra. And that is the zone where you can rewrite the contracts in your favor, right? So that concludes my video for October. I do have 2025 readings coming very soon. I will be announcing those through my Substack and then through my other social channels after that, in the early October phase. But if you want first dibs on the readings, become a paid Substack subscriber. Also, my 2025 forecast videos will be coming soon in the fall season, and that will cover every new and full moon for your sun, moon, and rising sign. And those videos will be very dense, detailed, and intricate, but very practical and straightforward and easy to digest. And those videos help you prepare for the entire upcoming year. And if you know me and you know my videos, you know that I'm very detailed in my forecasts and consistently accurate. So you'll definitely want to download those videos when they come out for all three, your sun, moon, and rising. And if you talk to people who downloaded my 2024 forecasts last year, they were able to use those forecasts to time major events in their lives, like moving, having a family, changing jobs, and you don't want to miss out on this year's. So yeah, I wish you the best of luck in October. I hope that you stay even keel. I hope that you hold steady, again, during a time of stress. And, feel free to leave some comments down below. Let me know if the horoscopes are on track for you. Let me know how you feel about the global events right now. Let me know whether or not you feel that my predictions are likely to come true this month, or if you feel like it's maybe something else. Yeah, curious to hear your opinion. So thank you so much. I'm Evan Nathaniel Grimm, and take care.